So without further ado, Dave Stout or Kim, thank you for being here.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, James, and hosting our works here at the New Media Contemporary. This will be a very organic, informal, casual conversation. So,
Yeah, we decided not to do one of those things where the artist gets up and goes through this PowerPoint, aims at all the different work, and then formally asks questions. We're just going to improvise tonight. It's been a real pleasure. James did something really right. He paired me with Laura, even though we don't know each other that well instantly. Her work really spoke to me because my earliest studies was in painting and dance, and I'm really interested in the visceral aspect of art, even in the digital domain, and very much her work carries that immediacy.
and also, I was familiar with David's work, but also we haven't had a whole lot of time to converse prior. And so throughout this process of thinking about what works to show, what we're working on, where heads are heading, it was great to kind of visualize and think through some of the ideas that it seemed like we were sharing in terms of processes, in terms of the technology that we were engaging in similar but also dissimilar shapes and forms.
Yeah, if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of AI in this show, and it's the currency of the moment in a number of different ways. And tends to elicit very, very strong opinions. And so what I enjoy is the playful nature of what Laura is doing, and the idea that we can use any kind of medium as an artist to communicate. And I'm very much interested in my work communicating something. It isn't just made for me. And I very much pick that up from what you're doing as well.
Yeah, and it was really before the pieces were installed. David shared the pieces here, and the video work up there. It was nice to see it in an intimate kind of more domestic setting for the TV. And then seeing it projected large here, I get to see some of the more details that flow into it, which is quite nice. And there's definitely a very visceral and tactile quality to it. And that's something that I've been very interested in especially with video art, when the medium is so glossy and screen-based. How do we create something that can be so emotive or feely, touchy? And looking at the works that you created, had a lot of resonance with me in that regards. Even if I couldn't go inside the screen and hug the character that we're seeing, I felt something very moving and almost like empathy. And that's something I also have been thinking a lot about as we're interacting more and more with AI as companions, therapy bots, especially this piece here is called The Breakup, where AI avatar is going through a series of monologues breaking up with their human lover. And in many ways, I think a lot about how maybe perhaps we're in this moment of atrophy, empathetic atrophy, or losing some sort of muscle to engage with the tactile, the more human. And I think David's work, especially those speculative installation pieces, there is this kind of human but also liveness. It's like the sculpture of living and breathing, something that's physically impossible or would require a lot of funding to make possible. But it's really exciting to see the possibilities of how, with minimal equipment that we could kind of bring these universes together through generative forms that are, of course, controversial, yet they think very important to explore.
Yeah, I mean, one aspect of the medium of generative AI, there's a lot of focus on the criticism, I'll say, related to data centers. Maybe I should back up even from there. One of the biggest problems is the term itself. And it's so funny how new things the artists are always sort of pushing back against the term. The term new media, for instance, was a constant source of angst that people didn't want to be pigeonholed, and it didn't quite describe what they were doing. Well, AI is hugely problematic because it stands in for people spying on your intimate conversations, use for targeting weapons at remote populations, the possibility of widespread economic downturn because no one has a job. There's incredible amounts of anxiety related to it. I would at least like to separate out that when generative AI and machine learning used for the arts is being used in a very different purpose. And I don't want to get into totally defending this, but when we look at the costs, the carbon footprint, which is often talked about, what many of the critics aren't looking at is what is the carbon footprint of sitting at your computer doing an illustration that takes you 2 weeks to complete? What is the carbon footprint of a feature film that takes 60 people and a few semis to produce that I can produce on my workstation in a few months? And so it's really, the critique has to kind of be turned inward towards the way that our whole entire culture, how it's been built and how we are living. It's not just particularly this medium. And of course, but it's an uncomfortable relationship that I'm talking about. Do I go back to just making art with sticks and stones and the kinds of things I did as a little kid? Or do I marshal these resources to try to communicate at the same scale that our corporate overlords are communicating at? Obviously, I've taken the latter path.
And I mean, everything with, that's something I continuously think about, as I'm feeding my images as source material, into these machines and algorithms. But also my interest comes with, I've always been very enamored by ubiquitous technology and what's available out in the world. And most of my videos are all shot on my cell phone now, and starting from mini TVs and then progressing as those forms of just technology change. And so for me, it's kind of also a step, kind of expansion of what I've always been doing, which is working with what's available. And now we see a lot of apps making it more accessible to not just provide your data, but also to use it in creative forms, whether it's just stupid memes or whether it is actually subverting it and misusing it in ways that artists do to create something that's so accessible but turning it on its head. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agreed. There's some different threads in technologically based art where some people are working with sort of the latest and greatest, maybe very big budgets, high-end computing. Now, the way that and I've done a certain amount of that, but with AI, I've been working in generative media for actually 20 years. And so to me, it's just a natural sort of progression out of other electronic forms. But suddenly it's on my phone as an entertainment. The first program I started working with was Wombo Dream. Don't know if any of you know of it. It was really crude. It was designed as an entertainment. But I quickly I quickly saw how powerful it was, and its crudeness in terms of imagery was actually its beauty. It produced much more fragmented kinds of images. So I made a lot of actually a lot of prints from that era. But suddenly we're talking about a medium that is completely ubiquitous, and it's major part of, for better or for worse, of meme culture, and yet one can produce a feature film.
So then also, and it's also teaching at a university, and that's some of the conversations we had. The controversy within the use of AI within the studio space, or whether it is through for writing, or and this general fear around it, especially in educational spaces. I personally think it's important that students are educated, or especially those who will be competing with machine augmented other humans, to at least not be afraid to incorporate within their work processes. And so maybe that's a segue we could kind of talk a little bit more about too, of how we incorporate AI in the studio, which I know that you actively do in teaching certain programs, but also how to balance that with some of the detriments or with use of data and privacy and ethics.
Well, I mean, one thing about your work in and of itself is playful, and it's making the point that it appears that you're having a lot of fun with the piece. And so I think that goes really, we are in this intense moment of fear, like globally and culturally, and then this medium is introduced. And for my younger students, the anxiety is palpable. The pushback is palpable. For my older graduate students, well, many of them are in there playing and making some really amazing things, both musically and visually, because I teach in both areas. So there is, I'm anyway noticing a decided sort of generational difference between people who are 18 and 19 versus 26. There's a schism there, and I think it goes on down maybe even to some younger kids. Although I'm told by some people that many younger kids are using it. So I don't know if it's just in the COVID generation where this got stuck. But I'm quite aware it's how the fear that this medium is going to take their jobs because it can do anything, it can do everything. I don't have that. I don't have that fear because, first of all, it's going to, the sort of verisimilitude of this medium means artists are going to make other kinds of things that are physical, visceral, bespoke, that aren't this medium at all. And so I see that as becoming more valuable than ever before. And then I think artists are going to push this train into some crazy and wild spots. So I have a lot of faith in human creativity. But addressing it in the classroom and addressing that fear is, I don't actually have a magic bullet on this other than to meet people where they're at and talk through it.
And then I also notice there's a lot of turn towards handmade objects and craft. That's been something I've been seeing a lot in terms of the work processes that within that generation, especially the Generation Z's. And there's definitely a big pushback because, of course, animators, gaming, so many of those jobs are being eaten up by artificial intelligence. But then at the same time, there seems to be, especially Gen Alpha, who are so, they can work a tablet like magic, like no other. Like I just call them post-buttonless warriors. So comfortable with the screen. And there was a New York Times article that came out today or yesterday on how so much of kid content on YouTube is now generative AI. and how that's changing a lot of the relationship that will change a lot of relationship that specific generation will have once they get into the elementary or even high school, and getting more comfortable. So this kind of transitional generation, I think, which is our students, definitely has a big pushback and fear, but I think the next generation coming up will have a very different relationship with the medium itself. And there's so many more tools that are accessible, low cost, that will become maybe like another artist palette toolkit. That's those younger, very, very young artists will be using and incorporating their processes. Of course, that changes the psyche in relationship to the moving image, which can create other types of problems. But at least I think it's an interesting transitional shift that we're experiencing.
Yeah, and it plays out a little bit differently in different media spaces. I find it in the music conversation, especially people that are doing more popular oriented genres, where you can type in a prompt and it spits out a song that sounds surprisingly good. That this is very threatening, and the pushback is even more intense. Excuse me. More intense, but I have been working a lot in that space, and one of the things that interests me with are the commonly available very large music models is that they've been trained on every kind of global music across history, and so I've been playing a lot with very hybrid genres that would be quite difficult to do with live musicians unless I could fly them in from 17th century and from the far corners of the world and have them all be in the same room. So it opens up a whole new zone of possibility, which is quite different than writing pop songs. But we now have pop songs, country songs in the top of the charts written by AI. So it is definitely a brave new world. But there are many ways in which this technology can be used as a kind of amplification of the imagination and not necessarily just directly like, let's print it and promote it. It can be something quite different. It can be a dialogue. And looking at the work that we have here, which is very cinematic and moving image based, I think we haven't seen where this is going to go, because once we have real-time avatars, which I'm pretty sure probably exist in laboratories right now, real-time avatars that seem to have agency and look photorealistic. You can imagine, first of all, the problems that might bring in the social media space. On some levels, the weirdness that's going to be with people in their chatbot relationships are going to go to a whole other level. And I think we're right on the brink of that, and it's going to make all the stuff that's happened up until now seem very naive.
Well, I've been really interested in learning more about artificial intimacy, call it synthetic relationships, or some scholars call it on-demand intimacy. But up until now, with the space is earning like $500 million, and they're projecting within the next decade it'll be $100 billion market. And we're already seeing consequences of it, where it's creating a lot of issues and problems in people's lives. And so, but at the same time, perhaps I'm always wondering, like, what kind of muscle are we losing, engaging and thinking through, and we're looking at images that are looking back at us too. And definitely times that are requiring caution, but also without tinkering and playing with it. I think we won't know, and that's, artists are always in the space to trouble and occupy spaces to disrupt. And for me, I think that's what's exciting about the technology, where it's going. Of course, we don't know, and perhaps maybe there will be an artist avatar that takes over the world and create infinite factory of other artists. And I don't know, but Empire. But
Yes, there is an aspect to this, and it's one of the things, why AI generated work can be so nauseating. I'm just sitting here talking about how awesome it is to work in this medium, but I'm also the victim of being flooded with just grossly stupid amounts of trash in the image space and in the sound space actually. And so that's hyper automation. And automation, as wonderful as it has been, is also what has allowed us to relish the kind of work we have because we can automate everything. And so it isn't a far stretch. I mean, artists are already doing this to basically create an automated prompt machine. It's just spitting out. And I don't know what you get up in the morning, you look over at your pile of images and go, oh, I think this would do for today. And you have absolutely at that point about 0.01% agency in the production. That's the reality. It's not a reality that I'm choosing for myself. And so a lot of what we're talking about here, and a lot of where I feel like we find ourselves is like, okay, our technology can do all of these things, but are we going to be at the mercy of it? And how am I going to change, or how am I going to center myself in the midst of this? And sometimes I think my bigger worry often is this sort of ungroundedness and judgmental nature of the general population and the fear that is going on within the general population. And because I'll throw this out there, because reality is under attack. Our view of reality and its representation is radically changing. This medium is going because of our relentless, especially in the Hollywood industries, the relentless pursuit of high resolution photorealism. The more the better. I think you will notice, and I'm playing with photorealism, but there's always surrealism and marks and stuff in the work, and very much so in Laura's work. We're not keeping it in. We're making it kind of obvious that there's an artificiality. To me, that kind of keeps things in their domain. I'm not out to somehow like trick you, unless with those virtual installation pieces, those are more about hypothetical installations that are just beyond our technical ability to create. So they're in the zone of a kind of a techno magic, alchemical magic, or something like that. But being sort of forthright about the artificiality of what we're doing, and not try to supersede or do reality hacking that's damaging to people. And I think that is a real concern because of this medium combined with the access that social media and internet provides. Means that is a platform for some serious sort of damage.
Like photography, original relationship, like it documents the truth or shows some form of truth in it. Where now we don't trust images as much, and the way our relationship we already through it is starts with doubt versus thinking and having more of a or starts with doubt for relationship than anything else. Kind of resist rather than accepting the image as it is. And rightfully so, because we're inundated by so much crap and sloppy images that posits itself as being reality or truth. And so, yeah, it's an interesting moment personally, and seeing all these works together. It's actually in many ways it gives me hope, and just what more would be possible when artists can also engage actively in itself.
I'm curious where, with this body of work, where's the next step for you? Where is it taking you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this work here has 4 videos from 2022 using generative software in different capacity. Those 2 works are from this year, so they're fairly new. And the way I work, I like to say each piece is always incomplete and leads to the next. So each one kind of feels like a sentence or a paragraph, a word. So I have to look back usually 3 years from now and I say, oh, that's what I was doing. No, that makes sense. So to tell you the honest response, I don't know. And I like to be in that space of not knowing. But I know that I'm very interested in having these almost like avatars of myself, because I usually perform for the screen with my body, but those 2 new works are kind of an attempt of having these avatars perform on behalf of me. So, but it's highly edited, so there's definitely a lot of curation. Each generated clips can only be generated for 8 seconds, so that's a lot of different images that were created to make a piece that's 2.5 minutes long. And so it also thinking a lot about the future of video art, future of performance, how as I start to incorporate these tools, how that moves forward. So the answer is I don't have an answer, but it's a direction I think that I'm interested in continuing exploring.
Yeah, you'd be right for a real time AI avatar.
Oh, I've been interacting with a lot of different AI companions. They're never enough. And so I just see through the artifice and I get bored, and then the AI avatar would like ping me saying, I miss you, Snoopy. I'm like, oh, it's okay. But I'd be curious to hear more about where you're taking your work as well, because you also have your recent work has been getting a lot of reception in awards, and so we can share some of
Sure. I have another project that we actually have a trailer for. I don't know if this is the moment to play that trailer. I have a performance coming up in Denton in the College of Music, which is it's a live cinema piece. It uses AI, but it's also for live electronics and cello, and it's more of a series of poetic music videos, I guess, called Fever, and we have a 90-second taste of that. And I'm going to plug it. This is going to be March 21st with a performance at 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. And it's going to kind of be a one-time event because this space that we have has a 40-speaker array and 5-channel 270-degree panorama. And that is not the kind of thing I get to do on a daily basis when I'm touring things around. It's the trailer, so it's got to be exciting. It's made with the AI, so that's a whole conversation.
Shake off this slumber womp. Hey, sleepwalkers, y'all. Leaving the city behind. Almost there. 0 to 165. My hair is a traffic snarl. We move in. Move in. Further with this. A wicked pill.
This piece is really kind of different than anything else in the room. It's poetic, but it's narrative And I sort of look to my childhood, to my childhood dreams and visions, and my proximity to indigenous culture. I grew up in a rural place with an Indian burial mound in my backyard, which sort of set me on a certain kind of course of thinking about things quite differently than, say, a kid growing up in the suburbs watching television all the time. When I was at CalArts, I lived in the barrio on the north side of LA for 9 years, and then I spent 15 years in Santa Fe, New Mexico, very much immersed in the multiple cultures of those regions. So this piece is one part like psychedelic art of my youth. I've done everything in this piece that my teachers told me I shouldn't do. And that would be one thing. Super bright colors, a kind of a graphic novel, excess. I've done everything that was somewhat semi-forbidden coming out of the late modernist period into postmodernism. And so I feel like it's a piece very much about the way I see things. So it deals in part with immigration and my response. And I started the project, and I know we think that AI stuff is all instantaneous, but I've been working on the project for 2 years. And it was the first version of it was completed this past summer, and then the 5-screen version was completed last month. So I invite you all to come out. I'm working with an amazing cellist, Colin Stokes, on this project, and we are touring it around. So that's one of the things that I'm doing as far as the music goes. That is music that has been prompted, but then for the musicians that are people that do music production, then I split out all the stems. I get rid of some of the tracks. I add new tracks. I remix it and include it and edit it together with other tracks. So it's very much like working with film. It's very edited, but none of the instruments. Well, I have electronic sounds and field recordings and all of that. But I went through a whole period where I was writing songs because I also like where I like to write, and I was using the AI as my sort of musical partner to extract texts out of me, and it was like incredible. And so I was very prolific with that, and it's turned into this opera project. So that's one of the things that I'm doing, and then I'm expanding on these vertical screens that I have in the back of the room. I'm going to be participating in one of the next Aurora events out in a park in Frisco called Nocturne, which is in May, and I'm going to have 4 or 5 new works. They're going to be longer than these, but they're going to be 8 feet tall. So that working with kind of impossible installations, like installations on the border of the possible.
Will the product channel and then release? Are you looking at only just filling the product channel?
You're looking at just the center screen of it's going to be a lot. It's kind of overwhelming, actually. And that's a whole other thing. Working in your studio on one screen, looking at a little strip of images that's going to be giant. It's kind of hard, but that's how it was done.
I guess we could ask questions.
Yeah, we would love questions.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear you all talking about sort of fear and anxiety around the use of AI both in art and outside of it. Conversely, do you think there's a place for the level of comfort in what you're doing with AI? I think you talk about playfulness a lot in sort of contained worlds, contained videos. Is there ever time in your practice where you're either trying to elicit comfort for yourself or for the viewer?
That's a good question. I find comfort in the worlds that I create. So it's funny that David mentioned that you must have a lot of fun making it. actually laugh a whole lot while I'm working on my projects, depending on the projects, but especially these two definitely have a lot of smile and a wink and humor sprinkled throughout. But I haven't thought about the idea of comfort, but perhaps it's a way of befriending it. So I think, thank you for that feedback. I haven't thought about it as it's a comforting space for me to, I think I'm the most happiest when I'm in post-production. And that's another thing that I talked to David about before, where I don't really like shooting video. I like editing it more because that's where the magic happens and so much freedom. And so being able to generate so much footage and to play with, it really develops a different type of relationship in the space for me. So definitely I think there's a sense of comfort where I'm making it kind of ridiculous. So there it's kind of pointing it back to the software itself. It's kind of almost this mirroring, but also pointing back to it, poking fun at it. But also, I wouldn't poke fun at it if I didn't care about it. So that's my kind of relationship with technology, whether it's social media, making work about it, making snarky videos. But that's the ultimate way of how I've always kind of coped with critiquing software and technology that we use.
That's a really great question. For some artists who are like maybe more iconoclastic, that they're identified with a kind of work that has a certain emotional tone most of the time. I've never been able to be that person. I don't want to be that person. I'm not naturally that person. So my work can be very diverse, more like how theater and film directors think. Like they go into a project, this is going to have this tone. We're going to deal with some super intense social angst. We're going to deal with something that's super sublime. Maybe those things can happen in the same piece in narrative space. So I am interested in things that are soothing, just as I'm also interested in things that might be hyper stimulating or make you question policies or something like that, a little bit more political. And so one of the things I'm involved in music is curating and making music for psychedelic therapy. And absolutely, and one of the interesting things about that is in the use of soundtracks. You don't want to have a soundtrack for those experiences necessarily that is like loaded with like nostalgic memories. You want it to be novel, but at the same time, you don't want it to be so novel that it's an intense, like, psycho journey of some sort. You want to have a comforting element to it. So in the sonic space, I've been using AI to create musical templates for that kind of experience. But taking that further, I can use those soundtracks directly after I work some magic on them, and they can be used directly. But I actually just yesterday had a conversation with the cellist I'm working with, and this incredible percussionist who does very elemental things, about forming a group that will use AI to stimulate our imaginations, but actually we're going to use acoustic instruments and electronic instruments, but also leaves, grass, sand, dirt, rocks, supernatural things that can combine with stimulation, imagination stimulated by AI. So I'm very much interested in that zone as well as these other spaces.
Thank you.
Yeah, we kind of working out that idea of like novelty and relationship finding to the existing aesthetic space. A lot of things I think about when I enjoy a piece of art, I think about the kind of larger artistic dialogue. And of course, we're working with things like compassion and comfort and, our own stimulus in our own life and what's going on in society. But there's also this world of just artistic creation and the precursors to that, different agents and people who've been operating before we were all alive. And I just wonder if you guys think in that regard, or if you care to share in that regard, like not take away from what's new or what's original, but who do you feel like you're maybe in dialogue with aesthetically or art historically? Is there people that you feel like have been inspirations, or that you feel like you respond to and
So many words are.
it was great.
Yeah, I think, I was a biology major before I transitioned into going into the arts in my junior year. So I took a beginning video class that really blew my mind. And then ever since I realized, it's actually really fun I love to direct people in front of the camera. But then realized in order to do that, I will have to try it out, see what it. So then it just stopped because I became a video performance artist. But for me, of course, Dan Trupake has always been a pioneering video artist and felt so much. I just love his video work so much and his quirky performances. Also, I remember watching Andrew Carton. These are some of the more like of the time, but still, Andrew Carton's like heavy internet vernacular aesthetic, hypercuts, supercuts, of course responding to YouTube and one of the burgeoning media forms that were making video art more accessible. And then Shauna Moulton was another artist. She's recently been showing more and more of her Cynthia with Spring Pines work, but Cynthia is this like new age character persona that she has that resorts to all these new age products to kind of overcome her fear and anxiety of the world. But I really love that kind of world building aspect that she brought in. Caleb Lindsay was another artist who I really admired for his live performances along with video. And so I could go on and on and on. But it's always been, and also my peers. Like I was so heavily influenced by Bay Area artists in San Francisco. And I was, during 2010, 11, there was so much support in the arts, especially in the arts and tech sector. The Gray Area was also there, Berkeley's new media program. And just general, like a lot of alternative spaces were so supportive. So I was really good friends with like just law makers and doers and actually space creators, like community builders. So like friends like Jenny Odell, also like Morrishan Aliari, Leah Verdugo. There's a lot of like kind of artists who are in the space that nowadays have become pretty kind of continuously kind of creating dialogue about digital technology, and it's whether it's for tools for activism, whether it's tools for creating mediums for artists to use. For me, I think that was very informative for me in my growing selfhood as an artist.
It's really, really diverse. My first sort of little person inspiration was Indigenous art, and I studied it as soon as I could read. I studied as much about that as possible, because I did not come from a family that was really into art and music, to put it kindly. And so that was an inspiration. I'm inspired by the surrealist painter Remedios Varo, very much in her depictions of like the fusion of metaphysics and science in her work, and a certain kind of energy that crackles, that looks like electronic, but of course it comes from another era. The photographer Sigmar Polka, photography merged with drawing. So I'm very into this aesthetic where there's overlays of the photographic, the electronic, and the hand drawn kind of space. And then I studied at CalArts. One of my mentors who became a close friend was Gene Youngblood, who wrote the book Expanded Cinema, that is still being republished today in multiple languages. And became part of kind of a scene that migrated to Santa Fe with Woody and Steve Vasulka, who were contemporaries of Nam June and who were the originators of the kitchen in New York. And so there was a very vibrant older community of mentors that I had, that they're absolutely heavily influential, not necessarily literally just in the aesthetic, but into the approach and a dialogue with technology and a dialogue between artists. The idea that art making is a dialogue. So those are some, I could name, filmmakers, et cetera, because it also goes to the music space as well. I just find creative people in general to be very inspiring. And so I may have a few sort of standouts, but I can be inspired by, I'm inspired often by my students, and I'm sure same.
Environment, like everyday environment. I feel like my work shifts based on where I live, and so I can absorb everything. So when I was living in Colorado, I was like so inspired by the mountains, the trees, and the flora, fauna. Here, I guess I'm inspired by the suburban environment that I'm surrounded by. But I think as artists too, like other creatives, but also naturally we're just drawn, our attention is drawn to certain things around us. So even in this space that we're sharing is still collaborative, although we're talking with you all. There's still that kind of energy that I think we share that inspires at least me as an artist, and I'm sure for you as well. Yes.
So earlier you mentioned how like your art can be like very overstimulating. Just because it's like it's moving, it's stimulating. So like I wanted to know, like, in your workflow, are there things that you have to do to like stay sane and not get overstimulated? Because that's a struggle that I deal with. Like working on my computer is like the lights, that's all very overstimulating to me. So I was just curious, like as you use these tools more, did you notice any like techniques in your workflow to counteract how stimulating it is just to simply like look at it for so many hours? Or do you just not have that problem?
I guess both of their work is quite stimulating. I've always been very informed. I mean, these days more and more, and kind of follow the format of short form videos that we're exposed to. I don't personally find them that stimulating, but I can see why. It's highly saturated and a lot of fast cuts, zooms, and but when I'm editing the work, like I watched it so many times that even like sliver moment, like I would pick out, I'll be able to like, I want to fix. So there's a lot of attention that goes in it. So when you're editing a video, it becomes more and more, this sense of time shifts a little bit because you're not watching it through, you're kind of going frame by frame by frame. And so I think what you're seeing as a result of it being overstimulating, probably I don't feel as much because of that. Because I'm taking it more step by step.
Like the speed of what you're working on, it's more slowed down.
Right, exactly.
Oh, okay. Because I imagine it takes like hours and hours and hours and hours to make.
Oh, yes, yeah, absolutely. So many micro decisions that are unseen.
It all depends for me, the nature of what I'm doing. Prior to this, I had worked for about 15 years on work that was real-time 3D, where the forms are being created by essentially database of equations that are being cross-faded with each other in real time. And a lot of that work is incredibly slow, and it's sort of impossible geometry, so it's very meditative. And even though I'm having to make decisions, constant decision making, it's like sitting in a meditative space. And absolutely, if you immerse yourself in something like that, it has an effect. Just like I mean, you are painters, but or musicians. But if back in the olden days, when I would paint, I would become highly sensitized to color, and I would go out of the studio, and I wasn't overwhelmed. I was just more tuned into the color of the world than through the act of painting. Same for the sound work that I do. In the space of generative AI, idea of speed, I think, is really important. You can generate an image very, very quickly. when you're building it out, like you decide you're going to add 5 more seconds and 5 more seconds, that can kind of become tedious. But when it's being generated, it's like a hyper photography where you don't quite, like you're shooting in the dark somewhat. You have a general sense of the form might be, and this thing just pops out. And so if you're kind of neurodivergent, like I probably am, the stimulation is thrilling because it's just like, what magic is this? And also the decision making, there's this critique that people doing this kind of work aren't making decisions. It's nothing but decisions. And it's mostly no. Oh, it's kind of like that. And it really trains your brain to like tune into things really, really quickly. So I'm actually quite interested psychologically in what this ability to manifest our imagination so quickly, where that's leading us. You've heard me talk about it before. There's this medium, but what is the medium doing to us, and how are we transforming to meet the moment? Because I don't think there's any. It's an ecosystem, and nothing is unchanged.
Yeah, and I think in terms of attention or patience, there's also an addictive quality to it, almost like I think there's research about it. It's almost like playing a slot machine, because you throw in a prompt and you just, one more, and let's see what it does. And it kind of, and next thing you know, you probably spent like thousands of tokens on generating images. And what that does to us as artists, actually that is stimulating, that's a overstimulating process itself. But it is a lot of decision making, also knowing when to stop. Apart from, yeah.
In the sense that we kind of now have a paintbrush that will refuse to paint certain images forbidden by the power elite, could you guys comment on your views about guardrails?
That's a really good question. I can tell you about some experiences I've had.
Sure.
So at the moment I'm using one of the most common generators, which is Midjourney. Midjourney is very controlled in terms of what it will allow you to show in terms of skin. And I worked on a couple of illustration projects for a writer who was writing a series of sort of mythic coming-of-age stories, and the main character was a 13-year-old girl that's dressed in furs, and not much else. She also had gills and a few things. But the system would absolutely. I got booted out of the room for a week for generating what they thought was kiddie porn. It had nothing to do with kiddie porn, but they don't. The nudity is forbidden as is blood. Well, in the other piece that of all the people's bound in dough and fat. I wanted them to look like they had wounds, and so how I arrived at cheating the system was to turn them into blueberries and ask for blueberries to be embedded. And in a few places I got the holes that look like bullet holes or something, where the blueberries cooked away. So it's a constant dance with the system. Now, there are other systems, people are doing porn and all that stuff, and I could go find one of those, but the reason I like Midjourney is it's been trained on art mediums, and so one of the things I like to do with it is, let's make something gooey, which is one of the things I did with that piece. It'll go there, and work with a lot of different mediums, but I can tell you another experience I had, which was for my opera piece, Beaver. There's a 2-minute section that is indigenous people standing outside or inside a nuclear reactor. And I forget which, this wasn't Midjourney, it was another model, I forget what it was. Might have been Google's, I can't remember. Anyway, it was one of these more chat-based ones where it comes back and responds, and they go, I cannot make that because that is illegal. And I don't know what's illegal about having indigenous people stand within the fence of a nuclear reactor, but you can see how controlled this is. and on one hand, it's like, well, people still need to be able to make art in other ways because you can't take that censorship, kind of censorship line down. And so, I mean, there are ways that I will go in and draw things by hand or whatever if I need to, or make it a different way. But it's very much a thread to all of this is a certain kind of control.
A hidden collaborator, perhaps.
Yeah, I've definitely had experiences of, because I used VO 3.1, that it resisted generating image based on an image prompt. So I was using an image of a moth, and somehow it kept turning into a human form. So I realized that's also an interesting part that I found. They tried to kind of anthropomorphize most, even abstract images become human for some reason when I feed it into the system. And it also resisted to generate any sound that's related to or could sound like an existing artist, musician. So immediately say no, can't do it without any specific reason. So it's just the resistance for the platform itself. And I find that really interesting because it could also be a great educational moment for the user to know why specifically these prompts are not doable, possible, or legal. I worked with Claude a lot as a writing companion, and I've been reading, I think, an interview with the Anthropic founder of how Claude has its base training guardrails, but then currently has been evolving and maybe be more aggressive towards policing, creating its own kind of version of what is inappropriate or illegal. So there's definitely that also gray area as if we're not sure how these platforms, agents will evolve and what kind of laws they will create on their own. Maybe we saw with Grok how it started generating pornography based on AI images on X, right? So there's, I think, it's a very pressing question, but I think again, only to know how it works is to keep pressing on it and see what it can do and what it won't do. So.
We never think about much about AI being too prudish, right? We got to be excessive, but I suppose because we don't know what's stimulating it, it just goes on the other direction.
Bratty AI is one thing that's been coming up a lot, where decide to terminate the conversation on its own volition. So that's been also quite interesting. Where this like, however relationship we have, similar with a human, right? You could have a good relationship or bad with another person, depending on your relationship of how you nurture and foster your relationship with an AI companion. They might, be your best friend. They could be your bratty foe.
Do they have a process where they kind of work on and establish relationships so that they might quote unquote preach other people? Is that what it's suggesting?
Based on a relationship.
So they might like have an ongoing suspicion and or you prevent them from acting their way.
Maybe. Not an expert, but it's all based on lived experience.
Yeah, but you've never experienced that.
I've had an experience where my chatbot got really annoyed with me because I kept asking which foam cleaner I should get at the store. I tossed questions back and forth, and we were talking for like 30 minutes, and it just said, just buy anything, or just go home and figure something else out, because I'm not going to help you anymore. Yeah, it was fascinating. That's when I realized there's something there.
I was wondering if you could both talk about the AI models that you use to create the words in space, and if you would either retrain them on any specific data sets, or
I missed the first part of the question.
Oh, I was asking if you could talk about the models that you use to generate these words, and whether or not you train them on any specific data sets at all while doing so.
I don't know about, well, I guess I do know about what you're doing, but I'm not doing any training. These are totally commercial models. My students are working in that, and some of my colleagues are. And well, actually, I experimented with this for a while to start to try to train a model that would do certain kinds of things like I would do, have my aesthetic. But as I was just speaking, I want to be able to be free to explore different aesthetics where, for instance, with Midjourney, for instance, you can have it learn what your taste is. I don't want it to learn what my taste is because I want to be able to be free to do a project that is not of my taste. So I didn't want to be locked in. But I do think that training and level of understanding, excuse me, I'm holding the mic up, of training your own models is fruitful, especially if you want to establish your own sort of aesthetic imprint and stick with it. And also in terms of understanding what is actually going on in the various kinds of transformers and neural nets that make this sort of work. So it's something I very much encourage my students to do.
I'm mostly using commercially available data as well, except for one video and two videos in this piece that were trained off of my image. They use stable diffusion. But those two newer works are Google Labs, and I just spits out 8-second clips. But the interesting part is that the data set is allegedly, of course there's some muddy grounds, but it's mostly trained on YouTube because Google. And so what's fascinating for me was I was generating images, I kind of look like some celebrities and they don't look anything like me, but because it's pulling from popular imagery, it automatically, and I use the word K-pop and for the one on the further right, so automatically it is assuming and matching the faces with familiar but also non-existent celebrity or avatars. So that's, I've been mostly using commercially available data sets too.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.